the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brooks Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brooks Show on this Friday, February 10th. Hope everybody's had a fantastic week and we're looking forward to the weekend. Our final news roundup for the week is today, so we're going to jump into it. I will remind you we've got our Ask Me Anything show tomorrow with our panel of supporters plus any questions you might have. So that'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. And then on Sunday, stay tuned for the exact time, but on Sunday, we will have a members-only show. Members-only show on Sunday. I might do, in honor of President's Day, I might do Yaron's State of the Union address. So we'll see. Maybe I'll give you my State of the Union address. I promise it'll be shorter than Biden's and maybe more entertaining. Although I won't have, you guys can pretend to be Marjorie Taylor Greene and yell at me while I'm delivering it. Anyway, it should be a fun show. So those of you who are not members, become a member. You can become a member by clicking the join button underneath YouTube, and then you too can participate live. It'll be very interactive, and it should be a fun show. So join me on Sunday, exact time to be determined, for a members-only show. Members-only show. All right, let's see. Let's jump in. Oh, I was going to start with this funny story. It's not really that important, although it tells you something of the time we live in. And it's not something there's a lot to say about. But here's the headline. Here's the headline. The Church of England, the head church of the Anglican Church. Church of England would study using gender-neutral terms for God during services. So they finally come to the conclusion that God is beyond gender, that God is not a male, not a female, and that maybe referring to God as male is disrespectful for women and trans or whoever. So they will stop referring to God, or they're considering at least stopping referring to God as our Father, or He, or Him. They will adopt gender-neutral language to refer to God. So their make-believe being, they are now going to apply gender-neutral, and they claim, look, Christians have recognized since ancient times that God is neither male nor female. So yeah. Anyway, there we have it. The Bible says He, and the Bible was written by God. So if the Bible was written by God and the Bible says He, then I guess He refers to Himself as a male, even though He's not a male. It's very confusing, but that's the nature of religion. Since it has no reference to reality, it's just very confusing. It's very confusing. Yeah, this is traditional religion. And Scott is now worried about them vis-a-vis woke, but this sounds like woke to me. All right. Let's see. Islam. It turns out Islam in Minnesota is quite an issue, right? So a few weeks ago, I told you about the story about Hamlin College, where art history professor showed a painting of Muhammad from, what is it, the 12th century or something, and Iranian, Persian, and Muslim students complained, and the professor was fired, even though the professor had given a warning, told students he was going to do this, even though this is an art history class. You're supposed to show the art in an art history class. Anyway, there's a huge outcry. I mean, quite amazing, the extent of the outcry. University of Minnesota came out against the university for firing him. And then it turned out even the faculty of Hamlin College actually voted to ask the president to resign because he had fired this professor. So you know, you can offend everybody pretty much. Well, not anymore. I guess you can't offend the snowflakes. But you can offend many religions except Islam. You cannot offend Islam. You cannot show depictions of Muhammad at Hamlin College. Well, there was another controversy related to Islam, also in Minnesota, at a university called Macalester College or Macalester University, I'm not sure, where there was an exhibit by an Iranian immigrant to the United States, an Iranian artist who describes herself as a feminist, and she basically had an exhibit, if you will, in support of the women in Iran who are protesting, in support of the Iranian protests, which is super important. So, for example, one of the neon signs, this is kind of modern arts, it's collages and neon signs and some sculptures, but probably not very realistic, although it's hard to, they don't really show a lot of pictures in this article because I guess they don't want to offend. But anyway, so it's paintings, photographs, collages, and there's a neon sign saying "Women, Life, Freedom," which is, of course, the slogan of the Iranian protest. The exhibit also has women in hijabs but with parts of their bodies exposed, or negligee exposed, or breast exposed. So a commentary about a female body, a hijab, you know. So obviously, obviously a critique of what is going on in Iran and support for the protesters. So some sculptures and drawings in the exhibit depicted exposed bodies of Muslim women wearing hijabs or niqabs. Some Muslim students at the university were offended. So over the weekend, the university shut down the exhibit. It put all the paintings and all the sculptures behind kind of a black material, so you couldn't see it. They held meetings with students for them to have an opportunity to express their feelings. Following the weekend, the university decided, to its credit, to keep the exhibit open. They took away all the covers and they opened up the exhibit. They did put glass on the door where you could look into the exhibit. They put in frosted glass so you couldn't see what was inside, so as not to expose the people just walking by to the artworks. They also put up a warning on the door saying, "Ooh, you might be offended. Beware. Don't go in if you're going to be offended." But they also put up on the door a poster from the group objecting to this, asking for people to sign a petition to have the artworks removed, or at least some of the artworks removed. And they included that on the door, which is a little bizarre, right? Even though they've agreed to have this. Muslims in the United States, but really Muslims all over the world, continue to be offended, continue to resist any kind of critique of Islam, any kind of questioning of the faith, any critique of their, some of which are pretty barbaric traditions. They are offended by it and they want it silenced. They do not want their religion critiqued or questioned, and they do not want depictions of the Prophet Muhammad anyway. And Muslim students, particularly in Minnesota, it looks like, are actively objecting to any attempt to depict their religion in ways that do not conform to their emotions, I guess. And of course, this is a worldwide movement. This goes back to Salman Rushdie, who we'll get to in a minute. This has to do with the Danish cartoons and Charlie Hebdo. And this is a continuing battle with the anti-liberal, anti-free speech, open to criticism attitude of the Muslim world, and to the Islamists who are vocal within it, But these are probably not even Islamists. These are people who just don't want to be offended. But people are offended by art all the time. Close your eyes, walk away. And of course, people have a right to, boycott an exhibit. People have a right to demand that a private institution shut down an exhibit. That's not a violation of free speech. People have a right to demand that a professor be fired. The question is, are there objective standards for all of this? And what are they? And their offense and the fact that their religion is being criticized are not objective standards that a university, an academic institution should abide by. So good for this university for keeping the exhibit open. Good for the faculty of Hamline College for calling for the president of Hamline College to resign. I am glad to see some American institutions starting to push back against this kind of behavior by Muslims. I remember when we were showing them, I don't know if you guys remember this, some of you might know this, but when the Danish cartoons came out in the demonstrations all over the world, and American newspapers would not publish the cartoons, the Einerman Institute sponsored events all over the country at university campuses where we did panels on free speech, where we showed big posters of the cartoons. We showed big posters of the cartoons, and we had a panel on free speech. At NYU, at New York University, they wouldn't let us show the cartoons. So what we did was we put up the cartoons on stage, these big posters, and we covered them with sheets, which actually turned out to be more effective because you're not allowed to look. You're not mature enough. You might be offended. The powers to be won't let you see, won't let you think, won't let you hear, won't let you look at this because it's inappropriate. So this whole free speech debate around Islam is super important. It's important to emphasize the importance of free speech, and I'm glad to see some institutions standing up to the hysteria about this. I wish they applied the same principle to other attempts to restrict free speech, David Arsenault says, thanks for the support, David. Save our figurative art from those wannabe theocrats. Yes, and I don't even know if this is art, right? I don't know if what was exhibited is even art or would qualify as art. But yeah, save whatever you want to call it. Save our ability to express ourselves. Certainly it was expression from the theocrats. Volta, thanks for the support. Really appreciate it. All right, let's see. So that is, so Salman Rushdie. I recently saw a picture of Salman Rushdie. As you know, he was attacked and almost killed while giving a talk by a Muslim offended by Salman Rushdie's literature, following up on a fatwa that was issued by Ayatollah Khomeini in the 1980s and that has never been rescinded by the Iranian regime. Salman Rushdie, as you might know, has lost an eye and now wears a patch on one eye. He is, you can see he's lost quite a bit of weight. He's kind of thin. But it's great to see him up and about. It's great to see him alive. He's got a new book that has just come out. I mean, I'm not a fan necessarily of his literature, but I'm a fan of Salman Rushdie. I'm a fan of his courage. I'm a fan of his determination not to stay silent, not to stay in hiding, to stand up to the barbarians. And I'm hoping that more and more people will gain inspiration from Rushdie in standing up to Islam and standing up to the barbarians of all forms, of all religions, of all tribes who are trying to silence us. So, 2 cheers for was it 2 cheers? 3 cheers. 3 cheers for Salman Rushdie. All right. Let's see. Yeah, government schools. There's a new report out by the Urban Institute that's titled "Where the Kids Went." So what happened during COVID is that over the 2 school years following the pandemic, really during the pandemic, 2020 and 2021, K through 12 enrollment in schools fell by more than 1.2 million students. And the question is, where did these kids go? And of course, we know why this happened. This happened because public schools closed. And it happened because public schools, many of them insisted on little children wearing masks, absurd and ridiculous. It happened because parents suddenly discovered what their kids were learning, or as the case may be, not learning, and found alternatives that were better. So there was a real awakening among parents, I think, during the pandemic, to the realities of what government schools were teaching their kids and to the realities of what was going on at government schools. And a lot of parents took their kids out. So in the 21-22 school year, private school enrollment was 4% higher, so quite a few parents moved their kids into private schools, while homeschool enrollment was 30% higher. Now, of course, homeschool started with a smaller base, but still, 30% in 1 year is huge, humongous. That is a massive increase. So a lot of parents decided that they're better off keeping the kids home and teaching them at home than they are in sending them to school, given what they're being taught in school, or given the fact that schools are closed, or given the fact that schools require their kids to have masks on, which is barbaric, to say the least, right? The growth in private school enrollment was particularly large in kindergarten and early elementary grades. I think that's where, in particular, the mask mandates and the closures were super ridiculous. And where many private schools stayed open. DC and 21 other states where you could get data saw homeschool enrollment rise dramatically. In North Carolina was the one where you saw the smallest rise in homeschool enrollment. It was only 8%. But listen to these numbers. In Florida, homeschool enrollment rose by 43%. In New York, homeschool enrollment rose by 65%. In Pennsylvania, by 53%. These are astronomical numbers, amazing numbers, and yeah, I mean, this is phenomenal. So during the pandemic, the school-age population of the U.S. also shrank. So part of the 1.2 million students not going to school is that just fewer kids. But what is interesting also is if you take into account the number of homeschooled kids, and if you take into account the number of private school kids, and you take into account the shrinkage of just the number of kids, there's still a lot of kids missing. There's still a real puzzle as to where the other kids are. For example, between 2019 and 2020, and 2021-22, in California, K through 12 enrollment fell by roughly 271,000. Some of these losses can be attributed to corresponding declines in the state's school-age population because people leaving and because people having fewer kids. Some of it can be attributed to people enrolling their kids in private education or in homeschooling. But that leaves 150,000 kids that are unaccounted for. That is, there's still a hole of 150,000 kids that are either just not going to school and nobody knows about it and nobody seems to care, or that are being homeschooled without registering with the state, or having left the state without being tracked. But there is a real shortage, for example, in California, but this is nationwide. There is a big gap between the number of kids that are accounted for and the number of kids that are supposed to be accounted for. So kids in the United States from schools have gone missing. But this is also, I think, more of an expression of the lack of faith and lack of trust that American parents have in our government schools. All right, thought you would find that interesting. And then let's see, what do we have? Yeah, Buy America. I mean, Joe Biden's speech, State of the Union address was entertaining primarily because of the back and forth with Republicans and the clown show that Republicans created there. But other than that, it was just a standard State of the Union address. But one of the things that really came out in the address was how similar it was in certain respects to Donald Trump's agenda and Donald Trump's State of the Union addresses. There's a huge impact or huge emphasis by Biden and, of course, by Trump in the past on this idea of Buy America, on this idea of cutting out, quote, dependency on imports, on forcing Americans to buy America, to, the idea of bringing the jobs back, to increase production in America by, forcing and enforcing a Buy America strategy. Now, this is just an awful idea, and as Harry Binswanger wrote in an essay years and years ago, it's an anti-American idea. It's clearly an idea that is not fit for a country of individualists, pursuing their own happiness. But if you just look at the economics of it, it is an insane idea. But let's first, make the best argument you can for it. Well, the argument for it is basically that, look, we've discovered how fragile supply chains are, particularly from China. We've discovered what can happen with a global crisis, like what happened in Russia, where we have to de-link from other countries. Do we really want to put ourselves in a position where we are dependent on countries that are authoritarian, and we might have to, cut ties with, and maybe even go to war with? And how does that? How do we get all these important supplies? There is an issue about national security, particularly with regard to things like chip manufacturing. We're taking American technology and giving it to the Chinese, and then they build it and they become the sole producer of these technologies, and then we, in order to put it in our missiles, have to buy it from China, and they of course have an edge over us. So yes, you can see it in chip technology, maybe in other places, telecommunications, and of course manufacturing in the United States could be higher theoretically. Some people claim, some people argue, if not for cheaper, I'll add better technology manufacturing overseas. So let's bring it all back home. We'll be safer, we'll have more jobs, and we'll be richer. And that was, I almost said logic of Donald Trump, but logic is beyond this argument and beyond Trump, certainly. But that was the argument that Trump made. That is the argument Biden's made. It's truly astounding that Biden has really completely embraced the Make America Great Again agenda when it comes to economics. There is very little difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and there is a real commitment to this Buy America. So part of the speech, Biden said, we're spending a lot of money in infrastructure. We passed the infrastructure bill. That's going to create a lot of jobs. That's great. But one of the things we're going to emphasize, and one of the things we're going to nail even harder that was in the bill, we are going to require that all of this infrastructure be made with everything built in America, timber and steel and everything. It needs to be fiber optics and glass and drywall, and everything should be made in America. Now, this is insane. It is insane for a variety of reasons. But just on the basic, simple, straightforward economics of it, let's go through a number of reasons. Now, I'm going to give credit here to an article by Derek Thompson in The Atlantic, who goes through these arguments. These are just some arguments, some economic arguments why Buy America is not a good idea. They're not all the arguments you can make. They're not even necessarily the best arguments. They're certainly don't involve the moral arguments and the limited role of government arguments. And Derek Thompson is generally, I would believe, center-left, generally a center-left guy. But this is an Atlantic. So, cool. I'll go for articles like this more in The Atlantic, making the case why Buy America is a bad idea for good, solid economic reasons. For example, Derek identifies the fact that buying America typically raises costs. It raises costs. It makes stuff more expensive. And at the time where we need to build, and this country needs to build, it needs to build homes, it needs to build infrastructure. I don't think the government should do it, but it needs to build infrastructure. We need to build tunnels. We need to build desalination plants. We need to build a new and modern electrical grid. We need to build nuclear power plants. We need to build power plants generally. We need to build. This country needs infrastructure, real infrastructure. And yet, you're going to build it. You're going to build it by buying stuff, not the cheapest stuff, but the stuff that's in America that's more expensive. There's a reason why it's imported today. It's imported today because it's cheaper. It's imported today because it's of higher quality. It's important today because you might be able to get it on time versus American producers might be limited. For all those reasons, buying domestic is going to increase cost and delay projects. In a new report, there he calls it a disgraceful new report. I agree with him. New York's Metropolitan Transit Authority found that it spent $4.5 billion on the first leg of the 2nd Avenue subway line, just the beginning of it. Now, this is insanity. If you think about how quickly the subway was built 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, by private enterprise in New York, how quickly it was built, how efficiently it was built, how cheaply it was built. This is stunning, how long it's taking to build the 2nd Avenue subway, how expensive it is. And now they're going to have to build the rails, and they're going to have to make sure the timber, and they're going to have to, that they use in order for the concrete or whatever. All of it has to be made in America, regardless of cost. Even if America is more expensive, have to buy it in America. It's insane. Insane. Shouldn't we be building cost effectively, efficiently, quickly, productively? Now, granted, a lot of the $4.5 billion have gone to, design and engineering and some of it to the construction of the tunnel, but the regulation, the bureaucracy, the slowness of the whole thing. Again, this is the New York Metropolitan Transit Authority, not exactly a profit-driven, cost-driven private company. Buy America can also make supply chains less resilient. Look what happened to baby food. You remember the whole baby food thing? Well, there was one Michigan plant where bacteria was found in America, Michigan plant, so they shut it down. That created a massive shortage. Now, European companies make lots of baby formula, good formula that passes by their own regulatory standards, but it's illegal to import it. It's either very, very expensive because of tariffs or just illegal because the FDA hasn't approved the specific companies in Europe, their formula. So suddenly, because one plant in Michigan shut down, the whole American supply chain collapsed. And we couldn't benefit from the global supply chain in baby formula. It's insane. Now, it also turns out that the government also awards money for baby formula because a lot of people get their baby formula subsidized, and they only allow them to spend the money on a baby formula for 3 companies, therefore creating a very concentrated American baby formula industry, so that one plant shutting down completely disrupts baby formula supplies in the United States. But just think about if we had a global supply chain of baby formula. I mean, one of the amazing things about the global supply chain during COVID is that everything was indeed available. As soon as there was a real need for masks and all this other stuff, it arrived. The only thing restricting supply chain to work properly was price controls, in a sense, the inability of people to charge higher prices in a time of shortage that disincentivize supply to meet demand. But it's stunning how quickly masks and all the other equipment arrived. Arrived from where? Not from other plants in the United States. Some, but mostly from other countries. And when, you know, and you want a wide, diverse supply chain, which will not crumble when one particular company or one state or one factory crumbles. So this makes it a lot less resilient. Right? He uses in the article, he uses an example of a different example to show the resilience of a global supply chain. He says when a Baltimore facility that made Johnson & Johnson vaccines, and don't worry, they're not mRNA vaccines, so I think they're okay to take. Don't worry, be happy. When a Baltimore facility that made Johnson & Johnson vaccines reported a catastrophic failure, the company could rely on a global network of factories that picked up the slack. So if you want to be less reliant on Russia and less reliant on China, okay, then maybe we should become more reliant on India and more reliant on Canada and more reliant on Mexico and more reliant on Brazil and more reliant on Europe, on countries that we don't think we're going to be in a position where we're boycotting their products because of a war, because of some massive violation or war like in Taiwan. Let's think strategically, but let's not just, blindly follow this nativist strategy of Buy America. Buy America policies also hurt innovation because they reduce competition, because they make American companies insulated from foreign competition, which makes them fall behind their foreign competitors with no incentive to catch up. So there are a million reasons, primarily cost, quality, competition, efficiency, and resilience, that suggest that Buy America is an awful strategy. It's an anti-individualist strategy. It's anti-individuals buying the best product they can for themselves, the best product that they will enjoy the most for themselves, and instead looking at the label and seeing, oh, it was made in America. Who cares about the quality and the price? I'm going to be patriotic, which is unpatriotic because it actually harms the United States in the long run. All right. I'm for zero tariffs. Zero tariffs. Bring it in for anyway. Boycott enemies, but otherwise bring it in for anyway. And companies don't become over-reliant on China. Not the government, companies. U.S. companies should not become over-reliant on China. And Defense Department, make sure that the stuff you need in order to build sophisticated weapon systems, you can build in the United States without reliance on supply chains from overseas. Make those supply chains solid. So I have some mothballed steel plants. Make sure that there is at least one facility in the United States that makes really, really high quality chips. They don't have to make it in a high quantity. High quality. So Defense Department, pay more for the chips so to create an incentive for somebody to build that facility in the U.S. There's so many good solutions to how to solve the national security problem that doesn't inflict pain on the rest of us. But the whole point is to inflict pain on the rest of us, so why would they stop? All right, that is the news. You notice there's no big earth-shattering news stories. I mean, it is sad to say well over 20,000 casualties in the earthquake in Turkey and Syria now, and who knows how high that number will go. It truly was devastating. The battle for Bakhmut continues, and Russia is losing thousands and thousands and thousands of troops in this battle. It is this whole Eastern Front is one of the bloodiest fronts in any war in a long, long time. Of course, the Ukrainians, I'm sure, are losing hundreds and if not thousands of troops as well. But I think the Russians are losing many more. And there's some interesting things going on in Iran that we can talk about next time. All right, let's see. We've got, we're a little bit over halfway to our Super Chat target. As usual, if everybody in the chat puts in $1.50, we make it to the target. So not that far away, given the viewership. Let me thank friend Hopper, Mike Dial, Wes, $50. Thank you, Wes. Very generous. Richard for $25. Thank you, Richard. And let's do some of the questions. No $20 questions today. Not a single one. Wow. All right, let's do Wesley's question. Noam Chomsky recently said that ChatGPT was little more than a high-tech plagiarism tool. What are your thoughts? I think that's ridiculous. It is a very sophisticated algorithm that allows you to get reasonably good answers to questions. Of course, it's not intelligence, it's not thinking, but it is a good finding tool. So Google better gets its act together, because the combination of ChatGPT with Bing might be a real threat to Google search, because it is a great tool for searching the web, searching for information. And it is a good search for stuff. I want to know when somebody died, or when somebody lived, or who somebody was, or what some philosopher says. It gives a decent summary of those ideas. So just as a first step, I think ChatGPT does a phenomenal job of presenting facts to an audience, and that audience can then do further investigation. Now, what we're really seeing is ChatGPT just be the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this is a technology that's going to change the world. What is called AI, which is not intelligence, but is artificial, what is called AI is undoubtedly going to change the world. It's going to provide massive benefits. It's going to reduce the cost of doing a lot of things. It's going to increase efficiencies dramatically. And there's a lot of money pouring into AI right now, and a lot of companies are rolling out their own versions right now, and a lot of companies have been working on AI in the background. ChatGPT is just the first. Microsoft has put $100 million into ChatGPT. But there are applications in healthcare, in pretty much every area, in law, and in all these areas. There are massive applications for this that are going to be truly astounding. The world is going to be changed by AI-like technology, by ChatGPT on steroids. This is version 1.0. And so, Noam Chomsky is just being his usual glum, disbeliever in anything of value coming out from anywhere. I mean, he's a really bad person. Shahzad says, sometimes people mention to me that we should buy only American. I like to remind them that during the war, nations like to blockade each other. Why should we blockade ourselves? That's right. I mean, and imagine, it's buy American. Well, why buy American? You should buy your own town or your own state, and then buy your own town. And why buy your own town or your own neighborhood? And maybe you shouldn't buy from anybody. Maybe you should just grow it all and produce it all yourself. It's just one of the beauties of globalization, one of the amazing things of living on planet Earth, is that you can trade with 8 billion people. You can take advantage of the fact that there are 8 billion thinking people around the planet, or at least some number approaching that. And that you can have a division of labor society, which Adam Smith, 200 and something years ago, identified as so valuable. You can have a division of labor society now, not just with 300 million people with division of labor, 8 billion people with division of labor, and that increases wealth dramatically. So globalization is a massive benefit to every single one of us, and it expands human well-being in ways that I don't think we can quantify, and that people just have no real notion of, have no realization of. All right, $1 from each person listening right now, we would reach our target. Bree says, I'm going to Steven Crowder's show tonight. I didn't know he had live audiences. If I get a chance to talk to him, would you like to tell him to contact you? Yes. I've been on Steven Crowder's show once. It was behind the paywall, so you guys might not have heard it, but I was on Steven Crowder's show. We didn't hit it off. Of all the shows I've done, it was the least, we just didn't connect. It's like he had a wall between us. He didn't want to connect. It was like he was skeptical. Why was I there? But yes, I'd love to be on a show. That would be really cool. I think I'd be a really good guest, particularly if he loosened up a little bit. Liam asked, $20. Thank you, Liam. Are you familiar with the Pacific Legal Foundation? Yes, they do fantastic work. They're doing a great job overturning occupational licensing laws. As the objectivist philosophy grows, we will see more law forms overturning government controls. Yeah, Pacific Legal Foundation does a lot of property rights issues, less licensing. Licensing laws are done by the Institute of Justice. But the amazing thing about both the Institute of Justice and the Pacific Legal Foundation is the significant number of their lawyers in both organizations are objectivists. And indeed, one of the board members of the Ayn Rand Institute is Larry Salzman from the Pacific Legal Foundation, a former employee at the Ayn Rand Institute. Steve Simpson is at the Pacific Legal Foundation. Several other people at the Institute for Justice are objectivists. I think objectivism has more impact on this kind of law than anywhere else in the culture in some ways. So objectivism, Ayn Rand, is crucial, is playing a huge role in the success of these legal foundations that are challenging things like property right violations and occupational therapy issues on that. It is truly amazing and truly astounding. And the number of objectivists, I just gave you a few names, but there are a lot of them at both organizations, which is super interesting. Let's see. Colt, I haven't seen Colt in a while. Where have you been, Colt? Missed you. Colt says, thoughts on North Carolina's Medicaid expansion. I think it sucks. I would also like to mention my state has a Republican-controlled legislature. Yeah, I mean, most states now have succumbed to Medicaid expansion. It's free money. Basically, the federal government gives them money, and the state has to basically say, no, we don't want federal money. And what state does that? This is part of why Obamacare is so insidious. The way it kind of grew and expanded the welfare state was by encouraging states to take free money, and North Carolina took it. Am I surprised? No. I'm surprised they resisted this long. But you will see within a decade, every state in the union will take it. It's free money, again. And there's no, what's the principle? We should do away with Medicaid? Nobody advocates for that. So Medicaid should be smaller by what standard? How much smaller? And if somebody else is paying for it, why not take it? Other Americans are paying for it. Let's take it. It's truly horrific, and it's a time for Republicans, particularly after the State of the Union and the zoo they turned it into. It's a time for Republicans to actually propose the phasing out of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, and let's have a real plan put together and presented, and not run away from it, and not shy from it, and not give Biden a standing ovation when he says Medicare and Medicaid won't be touched, but actually say, no, they need to be touched. We actually need to do something about these things. That'll be the day. All right. Hello, Y-Dog. Y-Dog, who's that? I don't know who that is. Have you seen the movie Interstellar? If so, what do you think of the movie? The sound picture is truly a masterpiece. Have a nice weekend. I have not. It's one of the movies I want to see, and of course, for $500, I will do a movie review of it. But yes, it's on my short list of movies I've got to see. In addition to the movie Shazbot has already paid me to see, and somebody else paid me to see Puss in Boots. That I've seen already, and I will review it soon. But I still need to see the one Shazbot told me, and then there is an episode of MASH that I need to see. Michael Sanders says, pain is temporary, pride is forever. Yeah, if you earn the pride, it's forever. If you live up to the pride, it's forever. Not your average algorithm. What is your plan for spreading objectivism once you reach your FU monetary level? Once I reach my FU monetary level, the same as it is today. I don't expect to change my personal plan. I plan to continue my work with the Ayn Rand Institute to do what I can to promote objectivism. I plan to continue these shows. I might be, when I reach the FU monetary level, I might be less concerned about how much we raise on any given show or how much we raise on a monthly basis, because it doesn't matter. It won't matter at that point. At this point, it still matters because I'm still living off of this money. But other than that, I don't see what I actually do changing that much. My FU monetary level has been delayed, so I don't expect to reach it for at least 3 years. I thought I would have reached it by now, but COVID threw a big fat wrench. Well, 2018 and then 2020 threw a big fat wrench into it. Last year it didn't help overall, but it didn't hurt that much, but it didn't help that much. But I'm still hoping that in 3 years I'll be there. But I don't see my actual activism changing that much. This is what I want to do. This is what I enjoy doing. And I'm not out there to spread objectivism for the sake of the world. I'm out there to spread objectivism because it's a value of mine, and I'm going to do it my way and the way I enjoy doing it. So I'm going to be selfish about it. Richard asks, Yaron, can you provide us with an opinion of credit unions versus banks without being dragged to the hoosgow of illicitly providing us with financial advice? Either way, thanks as always for... Well, I mean, you can't invest in credit unions. I can't really give you advice. I mean, the basic difference between credit unions and banks is the way they're taxed. Credit unions, if I remember right, are not really taxed. They're given significant tax advantages because they're not, quote, a for-profit institution. I don't think credit unions, core credit unions, would really exist in a free market. I think. I mean, they're a creation of a mixed economy. They're a creation of a convoluted tax code, and I think certainly today there's no reason for credit unions to exist. We should just have banks, but as long as they have a tax advantage, some credit unions will exist. But credit unions tend to be smaller than banks, less profitable than banks, partially because they're not for profit. The incentives are all screwed up. All right, Lyron asks, what books am I reading right now? So let me just tell you, the book I'm reading right now, where is it? I'll find it and I'll tell you what it is. I'm reading Ageless. The New Science of Getting Older Without Getting Old, and by Andrew Steele. And it's really well written and interesting, very scientific, no hype. He's not trying to sell you on anything. I've discovered it. I know how to, like some out there in the anti-aging community, you really get a sense that he's giving you objective information. Here are all the ways in which we age. Here are all the ways that people are thinking about it. Here are all the ways people are addressing the possibilities of aging. I haven't got yet to the section about what you can do today, but there's no fountain of youth, secret formula that he's giving you. He's giving you an overview of the entire science that exists right now, and that is super interesting and super important. I just finished. So I started that about a week ago. Before that I finished a book called Empire by Niall Ferguson, the Ayaan Hirsi Ali's husband, who is at Stanford. This is a book he wrote maybe 10, 15 years ago about the British Empire. It was interesting. It was good because it was short, relatively short, gave a good overview of the history of the empire, kind of tried to justify it in some ways, gave the context. I was a little disappointed in it, but overall, it gave me what I wanted, which was just a better grasp of that history, which I didn't really have. Some interesting stories, some interesting anecdotes that I didn't really know. I think at some point I want to delve more into that history and figure some things out in greater depth. There are a number of books on my list that I want to grow. We'll see. There's a book called The Cultural Growth, which kind of sets up, why did we grow when we grew? Oh, and by the way, if you haven't listened yet to the episode with Jason Crawford yesterday, and I know there's a problem on the podcast. No, it didn't record the sound, so we'll upload the sound today. But you can watch it on YouTube. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. I thought it was really good. Jason is very articulate. He's very positive, super knowledgeable about the history of progress, super nuanced regarding his approach. So do it. Go watch the episode. I highly, highly recommend it. It's got a kind of an optimistic, positive, energetic vibe to it that I think all of you could use. I certainly could use, and all of you could use. So go watch it and enjoy it. All right. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, there is the Ask Me Anything with supporters, $25 or more. You should have received a link to join me on video. The rest of you can join me here with Super Chat and ask questions. On Sunday, there is a, basically there will be a members-only show, topic to be determined, but I might do a Yaron Brook State of the Union, given that it's President's Day and given that Joe Biden just did his. On those shows, it should be really interactive, and you can ask questions. You don't have to use Super Chat to ask the questions. I'll interact with the chat more freely, so it's an opportunity for you to ask questions without spending money. But you do have to be a member to join that, and to be a member only costs like $5 a month. You can go to join, which is a button right there on YouTube, and join and become a member, and join us on Sunday. We'll be announcing the time exactly in the next, hopefully later today. If not, then certainly tomorrow. What else? That's about it. Next week is a regular schedule of shows. But after that, super irregular. I'll be traveling. I'll be in Europe for 2 weeks. So we will have to see. I'll be doing my travelogue rather than news updates. We'll be doing travelogue from different places around the world. All right, I think I'll be getting pretty close to. I'll be in Warsaw and I'll be in Tbilisi, so I'll be on the edges of Russia. All right, I will see you all tomorrow. By the way, we're $22 short of our goal. I don't know if anybody cares, but $22 short. If somebody wants to just jump in and do $22 so we get there, that'd be phenomenal, and I would really, really appreciate it. But otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow.